This is how to calculate the chi-squared test for independence using SPSS 27. Although I'm using SPSS 27, this process will work with other versions. So here I've got a simple form and it's got lots of information, but I want to look at, is there a difference in how people estimate domestic abuse for women based on the gender of the person? So do men or women estimate domestic abuse to be higher, or is it about the same? So really simple, go to Analyze and then Descriptives and then choose Cross Tabulation. So see, I've already filled this in, but I'm going to go and do this again just to run you through what we're doing. Now, there's no particular difference in which order you do this, but I'm going to go for my categorical defining as columns. So men and women are in columns, and I'm going to choose percentage estimates of women who experience domestic abuse as being the rows. As I said, this can be moved around. Next thing is make sure that your statistics are correct. So just go to Statistics, make sure chi-squared is selected and the phi and Kramer's V is also selected. What this is we're going to do the chi-squared test and then we're going to get the phi and Kramer's V effect size coming out. You'll see lots of other options here. That's because this version of analysis called crosstabs or cross tabulation can do a lot of different things, but we're just doing chi-square, so it's quite simple. The next thing to think about is the cells, which is what do we count when we compile the different rows and columns. In the count, we say observed, and in the percentages, rows, columns, and total. So all very simple things as we go. So click continue, and we're done. So we just click OK. And SPSS will pop out this quite a long list of answers. At first, this can look scary, but don't worry, it's actually quite simple. So the first thing you want to do is the assumption of sample size. So you want to have at least 5 people in each cell. What is a cell? A cell is when it goes between a row and a column. So we have 15%, 30%, or 65% as the available estimates of how much women experience domestic abuse in the UK. So we see here that seven women will say that it's 15%, but 9 men will say that it is 15%. 43 women will say that it's 30%, and 8 men are saying that it is 30%. And then you got different things. Now see here that we do have a lot more women than men. So we're not looking at the exact numbers in the cell. It's not that much important that it's 80 women versus 17 men, because we're looking at the percentage of total men in the sample. Anyway, you see here that everything is above 5, 7, 9, 43, 8, 80 and 17. If we had less than 5, it doesn't matter so much because we want to get at least 80% above 5. Now in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm going to do really quick maths because I'm not very good at mental maths. So 6 times 0.8, you would need to have 5 out of 6. So in this case, we could have one cell below 5 and still be okay. But generally, if you want to be really good, make sure that every cell is 5. In this case, we're fine. Let's move on. So the next thing we're thinking about is the chi-squared test. So we've got a significance factor, which is 0.001, which is the Pearson chi-square. That is really great. That tells us that we have a significant difference between the groups. Degrees of freedom is 2 because we got 2 groups. So that just tells us there's difference. It doesn't tell us what the difference is so much. So we've then got to do a bit more. So the first thing I want to think about is what is the effect size. The effect size is used with the Kramer's V, which is the last one, symmetric measures. The reason we do Kramer's V is because we've got a cross tabulation with more than a 2x2 grid. A 2x2 grid would be male, female, yes, no. But we've got male, female, and 3 options, so we are on a 3x2 grid, so use the Kramer's V. It doesn't matter which one you're using, it just matters that you're using the right one, because in a 2x2 grid, Kramer's V and phi are the same. but when you get above a 2x2 grid, the Kramer's V and phi can be different. In this case, the Kramer's V and phi are the same. So it's more of an interesting fact we're using Kramer's V. So we've got 0.289. How do we interpret 0.289? Well, I'm going to pull up a little table, and this is giving you what the effect size mean. So if we've got degrees of freedom of 2, then we can say that if it's, so 0.7 is a small, anything up to, then from 0.21 to 0.34, it's going to be medium, 0.35 and above is going to be large. So we've got a fact of 0.289. So we've comfortably got a medium effect size. That is good. That means we can really see the difference between men and women. We don't have to worry too much about anything else. We can say that the differences that we experience are real. So what are the differences? Well, if we go into our results, we see here that it is this third row here. Okay, 4.3% of women and 5.5% of men believe that it is 15%. So we can see a difference there. It's not huge. It's just really where things are. We can see that 26.2% there. So you can really look at the differences and how they are. That it really starts to run away at the higher end. That when we look at the percentage of selected agenda as identifying, it really is men are tending to perceive it as a lower figure, and women are more likely to perceive it as a higher figure. Partly this could be because we have a low sample size of men, having 130, we say 130 versus 34 cases. It could just be that we've got a bad sample size. So what I would choose to do is I would choose then to go into Excel, because Excel is really simple software for this. I reckon you could do this in SPSS quite easily, but you know what? I find Excel easier. So I can just go for male, female, and I'm going to go 15%, I'm going to go 30%, I'm going to go to 65%. I think that's the breakdown. Should we know this? Yes, it is right. I'm just going to copy the values which are within selected identify. So the male versions are 26.5 and the female is 5.4. The male in the next one is 23.5 and the female is 33.1. And then the female here, so the male here is 50 and the female is 61.5. Now just for sanity check, I can then just do a sum of the column. You'll see it makes 100 and this one also makes 100. So I've done this correctly, we're getting 100%. So what does this look like if we then chuck this into a bar chart? As I said, you can do this in SPSS, but I find it easier in Excel. So we'll see that at the lower end, men tend to perceive it as a lower item, women tend to perceive it as a higher item, and the difference is significant. So we have a different trend there, which is interesting that men kind of dip and then go up and women just go straight up. So I don't know what the actual figure is, I don't know what reality is, and I'm not trying to say what things are. This is just a simple investigation of what men and women perceive domestic abuse as, and we investigate it through chi-square. So yes, women perceive it as being a more prominent issue than men perceive it. The last thing we need to do is write up our results. So here I've written up pretty much what we just saw. So the first paragraph is the very standard, very dry way of writing up chi-square. So a chi-square test for independence indicated significant association between gender, male and female, and estimated prevalence or percentage of domestic abuse against UK women, 15%, 30%, or 65%. And then we have these bit which looks a bit scary, but actually is not. It's just the symbol for chi-squared, and then the degrees of freedom, n equals 64, so the n is the sample size. Then we've got the equals point, that's 13.679, got a point there at the start for mistake. And that is just the value we got from our chi-squared test. It's in the first column. Then the p equals 0.001, that's just our significance that we got, which we just pointed out was 0.001. And then of course, significance just means there's a difference. It doesn't tell you how big the difference is. So we put the Kramer's V in at 0.28, and then we interpret it as a medium effect size. Of course, a medium effect size is a great way to say it's an effect we can see. It's not huge, but it definitely exists, and we should be paying attention. The next paragraph is interpreting the bar chart below. Now, it will depend what you're looking for, depend on your research questions, so don't take this as the only way to write things. But I've said that Table 1 shows that for men, estimate a 15% prevalence at a rate greater than women. Women estimate 30% and 65% prevalence more than men. Men and women estimate a 65% prevalence for either 30% or 15%. So that's just me doing a very quick understanding of that. You will be looking for different things in your research and picking out meaning for whatever. And you might actually have the stat saying how prevalent domestic abuse is in the UK. I don't know who's getting this right, who's getting it wrong, but this is a simple way of showing it out. Now, of course, when you're looking at things like estimation of domestic abuse, there's various factors you might want to put in. So maybe age would change how you perceive domestic abuse. And that, if it does, then you can imagine that age and gender can be working together. So you can go on to do more advanced analysis to understand the problem. For example, you could do ANCOVA, analysis of covariance, or if you're doing something which has more than 3 groups, maybe multiple analysis of covariance. But we're doing it very simply here. This still shows something quite interesting about what people perceive. People really do think that domestic abuse is, by and large, quite a large population, at least over 30%, if not 65%, of population experiencing it, or at least women experiencing it. But it's really interesting that men in the sample thought that it's more likely to be 15% than 30%. Now, with further analysis, you can do Bayesian models and do some really interesting things. But hopefully this has given you a great insight that you can turn quite simple survey data into some great insights using chi-square, then write it up in this very easy to follow and professional format.